Good morning.
Good morning.
And good morning.
Welcome to Sunday Soul Day, your weekly fuel for your mind, body, and soul. I'm your host, Demisha Craig, and today I am thrilled to welcome our guests. We have Dr. Julie Shaw. Dr. Julie Shaw is an extraordinary individual who wears many hats. She's a wife, she's a mom, an educator, a grief wellness advocate, an experienced griefer. She brings a unique perspective to the world of grief and loss. Driven by her passion to create an inclusive community of grievers, Dr. Shaw founded Hello, I'm Grieving. Through this platform, she provides invaluable support and motivation to individuals navigating the complexities of grief, encouraging them to explore their emotions and discover ways to integrate grief into their lives while still thriving. With a doctorate in leadership, and as the co-founder of Lead Different Consulting, Dr. Shaw also works with global leaders across diverse industries. Through her work, she facilitates sessions in leadership development, diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as grief education. Dr. Shaw's remarkable journey and expertise will soon be featured in the upcoming grief documentary, which I can't wait to watch, in Meet Me Where I Am. Her story serves as a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of embracing grief. We are honored to have you on this show on Sunday Soul Day. Welcome, Dr. Julie Shaw.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for that. Me taking the time to just be present and listen to those words and really own them. I think as we're talking about soul, Sunday Soul Day is really making that space to have that like sit in my soul. This is who I am. This is who I want to be. So that was just really nourishing for my soul. So thank you. And I'm glad I took the time to just be present in that moment and to like own those words. So thank you.
Oh, God, I love that. I love that. Thank you so much. We are just so honored to have you on the show and would love to just use this opportunity to take us through your background a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because when I talk about identity, even when I do my DEI work, I think identity is at the core of a lot of the things and how we show up in this world. And I think when you just ask me that question, immediately I go, well, athletics has been a big part of my my identity. So, even understanding that, I will always somewhere in me be an athlete. I'll be a coach. That was kind of my background. I started playing basketball in high school, played professionally, went on to coach collegiately, had a chance to work for Billie Jean King as her director of education and work in the NBA. So it's like, for me, like basketball, sports, that is a world I feel like I resonate with. And I think it's also the foundation of what makes me want to succeed, that has taught me so many things that have translated into every step of my life on even with grief, right? How to keep getting up, how to be strong, know that like I can do hard things. All of that has translated. And in the leadership work that I do, it's all about teamwork, how you show up as a leader. All of this translates. So I feel like it's a loaded question on on my background, but I'll say athletics is a part of it. I'm an educator. I've been a professor. Like you mentioned, I have my doctorate in leadership, so I love teaching. I love coaching. And now I'm a mom, and so that's a whole new transition in my life too. So I'm going to see where that takes me and changes me, and how I can really lean into those changes because I feel like we're always evolving as humans.
Amazing. Yeah, I could not agree more. And becoming a mom has definitely helped me evolve in so many ways. And I'm so grateful for my children.
Mhm.
Um, I am just in awe of what you started because when I think of grief, and really, everyone is probably familiar with the 5 stages of grief, but there's
Mhm.
really like 7 stages.
Mhm.
And I realized that like grief has no color, no, it's
Mhm.
um, everyone will experience it in some way. whether they're grieving the loss of a job, the loss of a relationship, mourning a death, like so many different things. So I just really, your community is so powerful. And so I'm just so excited to dive into that. And just honestly, I'm deeply moved by what you started and just want you to share your personal story. Like, why did you even start?
Yeah, I started because my sister died in February of 2020. And as I've been going through that journey, another part of it and why I continue to do it as well is for her, is for other people, is kind of for myself and my own healing journey. But also, as we've been talking about being mothers, the pregnancy losses that I've also experienced during my tries to have a child, and my battles with infertility. So again, grief can come in so many different shapes and forms, and that's another thing added to the list. But when my sister died, and that's also something as a grief educator in my head, I'm like, tell people that even being able to say that is a huge step. To be able to use the word death, died, dead, like that can be very uncomfortable for people. And the more that we can practice that, and again, it's going to be different for everyone. But again, I like to also practice for me. Anything I even say today is like, this has worked for me, because it will be different for everyone. But there is power in that. And it also anchors you in that reality, right? And because that's something our brains have a hard time figuring out when we've had somebody in our lives for so long, especially when we're talking about people who have died, is now it has to kind of reconfigure without them here. And it has to make different connections, your neurotransmitters. Like this is all biology that's factored into grief too. But when she died, and again, that athlete part of me, I also think kicked in, is I wanted to know more. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to educate myself, because I did not understand what was happening to me. I could not understand, this whole process. And I had to understand and own that I was grieving, right? Or I am grieving because it's something that's throughout my whole entire life now. And that's where Hello, I'm Grieving came about. Is it was just this consciousness that I kind of had to wake up to just say in so many different tones, right? Like hello, like I'm grieving, like recognize that. Um, but then also owning it as my identity, like I'm grieving, and there's power in saying that too. But she was my favorite person in this whole entire world, in this whole, and she always will be. I mean, my daughter, yes, but I'll add her to the list. I'll add her to the list. But my sister was just everything. And when we lose somebody like that in our lives, it shakes you to the core. It breaks you open in so many different ways. And just the person that I am is I did not want this to pull me down into a deep, dark place. And so the only thing that I knew was to try to help others and to give back that way, which I believe helps myself, right? And there's a lot of healing in that. Now I will say a lot of people don't have to turn their pain into purpose. Like that's what I feel like I'm doing, and that serves me. But I don't want anybody listening to think, oh, that's how I can heal, is that I have to find some big purpose driven thing. Like, no, you don't have to, right? It could just be the simple thing of just saying hello to your grief. Like that's what can do it, is just acknowledging and moving towards acceptance. But I wanted to start this community so that I could learn from others, that I could help others, that I could just simply let other people know they're not alone, because grief is something that is not talked about so openly and welcomed in our society.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And I couldn't imagine losing a sister. So I love that you turned your pain into purpose, and also let people know that that's not how they have to grieve, and just even giving themselves permission to grieve is so huge. I know in our community, it is not always welcomed, and we are taught to quickly move through things and to almost get over things. Like people want you to get over things fast because it makes them uncomfortable
Oh,
because they don't
yes.
know how to show up for you, you know? And so they're like, what can I say to help them hurry up and get over it? And with grief, it's so important because it's not linear. It will hit you in so many different ways and years down the road. And so just really giving yourself permission is just extraordinary. And I love that you created this community. And I can only imagine, you know, as you continue to grow, how, you know, it will show up and really give people permission to talk about it more openly and to be okay with where they're at in grieving. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's one of those things too, like even how you're talking about permission, or what I really liked what you said was that comfortable piece, right? Is people don't want you to talk about it. They don't want you to bring it up. They don't want to ask you really how you're doing because of their own discomfort. And I think that's what a lot of people have to learn. And again, the sports background comes in because, you know, there's a coaching thing that you say is you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And so that's not only yourself with your grief, but the other people that are really trying to help you with it. And so, you know, I hope people listening, this isn't just for people who are actively grieving, but for the folks that are genuinely trying to help and support them, is you also have to sit in that discomfort. And because, you know, and it's also, you're not bothering a grieving person by bringing up their grief because it's always there. They're probably in some way, shape, or form always thinking about it, and they're probably going to be more likely like grateful that you actually ask them about their person, or that, you know, you ask them how their grief is going. And those are just, you know, a few things that you can do to help support someone that is grieving. And again, sit with your discomfort, and then that's where the true growth happens, is when we do get outside of that comfort zone.
Thank you, Julie. And I'm so glad you touched on that you didn't know what was happening to you. I also, I've noticed within my own grief experience that each loss I have processed or handled differently. And Demisha and I had talked about how you know, we had met right around the time I was working through a loss. A family friend, was murdered, and it just brought me to my knees. And I didn't understand why I was grieving in such a way where I wasn't eating, I wasn't sleeping, and couldn't see people, was afraid to leave the house. And I'd had other losses. And when I spoke with my doctor shared with me that she believed I hadn't grieved uh, all the other losses. And so I'm really grateful to hear that you shared that you didn't know what was going on. I didn't either. And I had the same thing, the athlete's mentality of I've done this before. I need to get through this. I need to move on. And I wasn't. My system was breaking down more and more. I tried to fight it. So navigating grief can be overwhelming, and many people find it challenging to open up about their feelings. How do you encourage individuals to share their experiences within your community and foster a safe and supportive environment?
Can I back up before I answer that question? You might have to ask me again, because I just value your vulnerability and being able to share that.
Yeah.
And also what you're talking about too, what you mentioned was all the secondary losses, right? Is because it wasn't only that this person's life was taken, it was these other things around in your world that were also taken and that are also losses, right? And so, I mean, it's exactly right. What your doctor told you is you're also grieving these other losses because those are the things we don't think about. We just think it's this one thing, but there truly can be multiple things that are around us, and those are the secondary losses where you're just like, oh, okay, that's why I'm feeling this. And then also goes back to what Demisha was saying, is to then give yourself permission to grieve that as well, and understanding that. Okay, you might have to ask me that question
No,
again.
absolutely. So yeah, that makes so much sense. Yeah. So navigating grief can be overwhelming, and many people find it challenging to open up about their feelings. How do you encourage individuals to share their experiences within your community and foster a safe and supportive environment?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, right? I've always found power in the phrase when you share your story, it allows other people to share theirs. And so I think even starting with sharing my own story has made it, and to be as open as possible to share my story, right? To role model that. So then other people can see themselves reflected. And I think that is the power and I encourage people, like I encourage people on posts, I encourage people on my website, share your story because I think what also people want is they want to share their story. They want to be heard, they want to be seen, and they want to be valued for that. And so I always encourage it. It's simple as in what was your favorite song that reminds you of your person? Or, what are some of the challenges that you're afraid to talk about, right? Like these, I want to ask people the questions that other people in their lives aren't asking them and being able to pull that out because they might tell one detail, but then I think when people see that it's a safe environment to be a part of, that they'll open up. And then also like, in-person events, or even virtually, even just the way that it's set up is that we try to make either intimate groups so that we can again ask these questions, give people different topics and to facilitate. And I think the minute people start opening up about their grief, they find these connections with people, kind of like they can kind of take a really big exhale to say, okay, it's safe here. And other people understand what I'm talking about without me having to explain it in detail. So, and then also, I mean, even when I do something virtually, something I always offer people is that they can private message me. So if they want to private message me, they can, and I could share their story anonymously. I've been so humbled about and grateful for that people in some way, shape, or form trust me with their stories and that they feel like I am a safe place to tell their story. And sometimes that's where it ends. They just really need a depository or they just need like some place to get it out. And I think that's also, what I'm trying to foster is like how can I create different spaces where people can get their grief out, because when we bottle it up, that's where it can take a toll.
And you absolutely nailed it. I think the having a safe space because for me, I also had a fertility loss, and at the time, I didn't identify it as grief. I felt very sad, and a family member sort of made some comments, kind of along the lines of, move on. It's
Mm,
not death kind of thing. And
hmm
because of that, I didn't feel like I had that safe space, and so
hmm
I believe that many people um, either feel internally like, oh, I don't deserve to grieve. Oh, it's, just a cat that passed, or it's
hmm
just a job loss. I should, people have it worse. They'll compare themselves to other people's
mm.
stories. Or they have a loved one or someone around them who's probably uncomfortable with grief themselves. And they get the impression, oh, it's not safe. So you, in sharing that, having a safe space is so important, absolutely. And it's wonderful that you are able to be that safe space for people to just get it off their chest.
I'm trying. That's my goal. It's like I want people to feel comfortable with me and to where I can get to the place now, like where I'll be offering like grief coaching, right? To where I can help people on their journey. But the other thing too that you also said was the judgment is I think another way that I try to create this safe space in the community is to remind people like we could be our hardest critics. And again, that's also an athlete mentality is we can also be our hardest critics and to understand that we have to release that judgment of ourselves, right? Have compassion and empathy for others. And it's also why how I even started out earlier when I talked about to use those two words for me so that it eliminates that you should do this, right? Or this is the way to do it. Because it is going to be very different for every single person. And even individually, like you said, your grief will be different each and every time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. And that's just so spot on to say the for me. Um, we share our own experience, strength, and hope, and then others can take what they want and leave the rest, and it's non-threatening.
I
It's
love
beautiful.
that. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, and it's a large reason why we, started this show, because there's such power in sharing, and to be able to have somewhat of a blueprint, but also like to take what works for you and what doesn't,
Hmm.
is really the motivation behind us gathering just these incredible stories that we're able to share. I could not agree more. Like, when we often say like grief doesn't discriminate, and it can manifest in so many different ways. I know that I've grieved the loss of, loved ones, a job, a relationship, a friendship, even.
Hmm.
Did a major auditing of my life just this past year. And there's so much, as much as there's the celebratory component and the feeling empowered to choose for your life, there's also the component of grieving. And people they're not comfortable talking about that sadness that comes along with parting ways with things. And so I just love that your community holds space for people. And just wanted to ask you, like, building a large grief community takes just incredible dedication and compassion. I know that's the athlete in you. But what were your, I guess, some of your first steps you took to create such a supportive space? And how did you manage to grow it over time?
Well, I think that's the key. I grew it over time. I've given myself a lot of grace. And I've been, really, I've followed my advice. Don't judge yourself too harshly, And to just stay authentic in it is to just stay authentic. I always say your vibe is gonna attract your tribe. So it's like whatever you're putting out there, like, and just stay true to me. And that's even something as I think as I'm getting older too, is I really do want to be that true person that I'm meant to be, right? That's what death will teach you. Death will teach you the biggest, lesson of this is only one time that we have, right? And I mean, depending on what you believe, right? Like this is your one chance in this moment. Maybe you come back, you got to try it again. But but this is your one time to have this experience, and what will you do with your life, right? That's the purpose driven life in me. And so it did take time. I did take a lot of grace not to be so hard on myself and just to continue evolving. And that's, even a mindset you can have as a person is like, how are you going to continuously evolve? And I think that's how it's just growing is coming up with different ideas, figuring out different ways that I can help people, listening to what people want, and asking for that feedback from the community, and really just also as I've evolved, like how I said with the grief coaching, in when I first started, I was like, there's no way that I could do that. There's no way because I was still really deep in my grief, and it really did just start as an outlet for me. It was a personal thing. But once I started to see how the community was growing and how responsive they were, I was like, this is something. Um, and so whether it is going to be the group work that I continue to do with people one-on-ones, now I feel like I have the capacity and space to hold even more for people, because before I was like, Julie, you need to worry about yourself first. And so and also just investing the time in learning more, educating myself, because that's something else too. I want to be able to have the tools to help people, and support them in ways that can help them. I'm not a trained therapist, and so I don't preach that I am, but I am an educator. I am an expert griever. I will say that, being a griever myself. And I've always been known to be someone that people I think can gravitate to and that they trust and yet to reveal themselves to me.
Thank you so much. And I wholeheartedly agree that your vibe attracts your tribe. That's one of my favorite sayings, and it's so true. And I love that you gave yourself time and grace. And I think that in anything that you're doing, when you're stepping outside of really your comfort zone and out of your wheelhouse, it's so important to give yourself that time and grace and not compare yourself to any other person in that particular space. So like not comparing yourself to another community that might have been in their chapter 20, but you're in your chapter 1. So it's a large part of how we're approaching this as well. And so I appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you. Yeah. And so we're growing, and it's nice to invite people to grow.
How did witnessing these journeys impact your own healing process and perspective on grief?
That's a great question. I think there's gratitude. There's a lot of gratitude again that people are willing to share. Um, it changes your perspective on knowing that I also have privilege. Like that's another thing too, and that might come from my DEI background, but also recognizing the privilege that I have. And I also want people to recognize that I see the privilege that is also tied along with grieving process. And even like the privilege, sometimes I think about people who, they need to go back to work because one of those secondary losses is now the breadwinner of their family has passed away, and now they have to step into that situation, you know and so that's why, like, you really made me think about this one. It goes back to that gratitude. It's so encouraging when I get those messages when people share their stories with me. And I think some of the most impactful ones are, I wouldn't have been able to get through this if it wasn't for you, right? And for people to just take the time to send me that message means a lot. For me to, like, I'm just out here doing what I'm doing, like, it helps me. And I think that's another perspective, is also if we can think bigger and say just how much of an impact you could have on someone without even knowing them. And so that's a big perspective I hope people can take, is understanding the impact that you can have on one person, on 10 people, on thousands of people, that your life itself can have an impact on another person.
Julia, I love how thoughtful you are and your awareness of privilege and maybe people's access to resources, and how thoughtful you were with answering that question.
I couldn't agree more. And you talked about impact, and I can imagine the impact that you're having in all of your community's life. Is there a story that you can share that you feel comfortable sharing with us? Just someone in your community and how
Yeah.
your community made an impact in their life?
Yeah. I mean, the fact that you just asked this, I just got a message the other day. And so what's interesting too is kind of how well, the message, I'll just go with the message. The message was from somebody that I had actually played basketball with, maybe about, oh gosh, it's like 20 years now. But this was a friend that would, like, come in the summer. She played at a different school, but would come and play like open gym and to stay in shape in the summertime. She literally sent me this message maybe a couple days ago. And again, as you never know who's watching, she sent me this message. And this is where I reflected back and I was like, gosh, I didn't even know the impact that I had back then. Right. And so it makes you think about how you connect the dots, and you're like, was this my purpose from a long time ago? Like, was this path already laid for me? And so she said, 20 years ago, like, you may not have known this, but it's like you really helped me through the grief of the loss of my father. Just how I'm going to get emotional.
I know, I am too. I'm like,
You,
that's so
you,
beautiful. Wow.
yeah. And she was just like, like, and looking back, I'm like, as a young 20 something year old, did I even know that? Like, did she share that with us? How did I respond? But I'm glad that, past Julie showed up as this present Julie, right? That like we played, that maybe that was an outlet for her. Like, we treated her like a human being, like a friend. And like that was the support she needed, as her dad had just passed, and now she's seeing me do this. And she was just like, I love what you're doing talking about this and educating others and supporting others. And just she was just sent me that message. And she was just like, I hope you know like how much that helped me. And so I was just like, wow, and so again, those are the types of stories that I'm just like, this is what I have to continue to do. And I never knew that this was going to be my path, and how, it is a strange thing how the death of somebody so important to you is still a part of your life, and how that is another part of what makes you who you are, and who you're becoming. And we would never wish that. I'm very grateful for all the lessons that grief has taught me. But I would never wish for my sister to be dead to learn those lessons. However, I could sit in this moment and say, okay, well, the truth and the reality is that she is dead. She is not coming back. Like, we know this. So what can I do to continue to keep moving forward, honor her life, continue to keep talking about her, and to share that with others? And so I never thought that this would be my path, but I'm on it and I'm gonna walk it, and it might be that road less traveled.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. And it's so beautiful. And you have had such awareness, like even back then, like I can feel it in you. And the fact that you knew how to show up for her, you know, when she was going through such an awful time is just amazing. And I think it's something that we can all learn from, because it's not easy, to just treat people like humans and to,
Yes.
show up and just, be there and allow them to dictate, like what they need. And so I just love that you again created that space for her. And it's such a beautiful story. And your legacy that you're creating, after such it's just extraordinary loss is amazing. So
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you touched on honoring the person. With my clients, so often I hear a person feeling guilty and they use the shoulds, and I tell them, don't should all over yourself. And they believe that the more they suffer and the more they're in pain, the more they missed the individual. And so we will work to explore ways to live in their honor, and giving the survivor permission to still live. Grief is a deeply personal experience, and people cope with it in various ways. How do you foster a sense of inclusivity and understanding within your community, ensuring that individuals from diverse backgrounds feel welcome?
I actually openly talk about it, right? Like, I openly talk about how, like, Kendrick Lamar has a really great song that I love. It's called, I think it's called Grieve Different, or I Grieve Different. I think that's what it's called. But those are the lyrics. Like, his lyrics talk, he just says like, I grieve different. And that really like resonated with me, because we all do, especially like based on our cultural backgrounds, based on our different ethnicities, like the communities that we're brought up in, even just the experiences we take in, religious beliefs, like we're all going to grieve different. And I just simply talk about it, right? Like, and I also, tell people like this is going to be an inclusive space, also identifying as a gay woman. I also talk about the grief in the gay community, understanding identity and how, like, owning again these different identities, whether people are, kicked out of their homes
Mm.
because they identify as being a part of the LGBTQ plus community. Like, there's grief in that. And so I think that's how I generate that. These are the things that I've been able to transfer and to carry over into the grief space with the other work that I've done in my past. And then also how you're talking about honoring is people will honor in so many different creative ways. Like, even take Dia de los Muertos, right? Like, that's the Day of the Dead, where people get to celebrate, they get to dress up, they get to have a feast, with their loved ones. Much beauty and understanding different rituals really pushed me to try so many different things and be open to it, that it's made my life more colorful. I've gone to Burning Man, which I love talking about. I'm still debating if I'm going again this year. The desert is healing in general. It's actually become my new happy place. Like whenever I'm stressed or like I'm feeling a lot of anxiety, I'll transport myself back there to the desert, to this one moment. And then that temple I was so in awe of that. It was so beautiful and magnificent. And you could feel the emotions when you walked up to it. You could it was this whole just feeling, and because it was a mass of people grieving and honoring the dead, and then people bring different things to post up on the wooden, building that's been built there. They bring items, they bring pictures, they write letters, and it is just an open place in the middle of nowhere for all these people to congregate and grieve, and to witness all these people grieving in so many different ways is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen.
Most people I work with know very little about the grief process. If they do, they know the 5 stages of grief, as we touched on before: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, or DABDA, and believe they're supposed to move through this linear process. And I think trying different things, having different experiences, as the different stages emerge within us, allowing ourselves to practice the healing through trying different things, I think is wonderful.
Also, just understanding that, like you were saying, like the stages aren't linear. You'll go through those ins and outs. They won't be in order, like all of it. It might be 3 years down the line, and all of a sudden you're angry. When my sister first died, I immediately had one-on-one therapy, but I also did group therapy it was very specific. It was for people who had lost their sibling within a year. So we were all kind of in our first year going through it together. But when we were in that group, it was just a really great healing place for me, because again, these were the questions that we could talk with other people, that we could get to have people that really understood that. But there was a question in there about anger, and I was like, I'm not really angry at anything. Right now, like, I was probably maybe more in that acceptance a little bit. But then when we did an activity and I actually had to think about it, and I was like, dang, like I'm actually angry at a lot of things. And it just took that awareness to be able to confront it. And it's hard for you to say it out loud too. That's the thing too, is when you're in that group and to say it out loud, that can change a lot of things, because I didn't realize yeah, and to own it, right? That there was parts of me, yeah, I was angry at my sister, you know? And you feel bad for saying that. You might feel guilt or shame in saying that, or you feel like you're going to be judged, but like that community space is a good space to be able to say those things. And it's like I was angry at her, or I was angry at her husband because I was like, he was being too positive, right? Like I was like, he was being too positive. And like, or I was angry at, my mom for maybe not, she's a medical professional, and why wasn't she telling me everything that was going on? And there's parts of you that are angry at yourself because you're like, why didn't I ask more questions? Why? But when you look back on those times, again, you have to give yourself grace that like in that moment, you were doing everything you could to survive, right? You were in survival mode. And so there's things that when you look back, you did a lot differently than maybe you would have done if you had all the knowledge that you have now.
I
And
like,
and yeah.
sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
I like to say I did the best with what I had. And now that I have different, I'll do different. And that offers a person grace and permission.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that alone makes me more encouraged to do what I do, because now that I know different, I want other people to know, you know, that I don't want these kept secret. Like I want them to know, so it can help them.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's so like, it's just huge what you said about giving yourself permission for that, because I think when in my grieving stages, and I've grieved a lot of different things as many of us have, I almost would skip or want to skip over the anger, or to make myself feel like, oh no, you're not angry. You can't be angry at that person for dying. Or, I had a cousin who took his life, um, and so for me to say that out loud, it took me so long. So I love that you encourage, your community to do that, and to really just keep talking about it, because you feel bad, then you're angry at yourself, and then it's like you almost have to forgive yourself for how you're feeling. And so um I just love this. I hope we're helping someone that watches this. So thank you so much for sharing that. Your community has just been growing, and you're touching so many lives. Like, I can imagine, hearing the stories and all the privilege that comes along with that. How do you take care of yourself? Like in that, like, one of the questions we ask all of our guests is, what are some routines that you do to fuel your soul?
Yeah, great question. I think there's a couple things is I really do lean into the different activities to continue to process my grief. Like for example, I just did a Wim Hof method, like where you do like a really cold plunge, but you learn how to like breathe. And there is a process where you go into a meditative state, and I allow myself to let my grief come out and to go there. So, and so I do those type of things. I'm thinking of doing like a Buddhist retreat for like maybe a few days. But the thing that I've been doing recently, which is very tangible, is that I've been using the 5 minute journal, and it's literally like name three things you're grateful for today. You do it in the morning and you do it in the evening. And so you take those 5 minutes and you just say, this is what I'm grateful for. This is my affirmation of the day. You write it out. Um, and also three things that would make today great. And so you do those things, and then um after I write those down, then I've been doing Deepak Chopra has a podcast challenge. It's a 21-day meditation challenge on abundance. And so it's about 15 minutes each of the episodes, and he talks you through the different abundance mindset for the day. And then you do a quick meditative mantra, and then I'm done. And so it take it 20 minutes a day. I can do that. Stretching, I'll try to, if I have a time, to do like a quick 10-minute, 20-minute stretch, because it's also physical, right? Like the grief also resides in your body, but all the tensions of the day reside in your body. So it's that whole mind, body, soul. And then in the evening, then I do the 5 minute journal again, to where it asks you what could have made today better. And then again, what's something kind you did for somebody today. And so I've been doing that, and it's been really, really great to really make the time to tend to my soul in that way.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I do something similar with, I write down three things I'm grateful for in the morning and in the evening. And I'm totally going to steal what you said about the other three things that you
Hmm.
do. Like, I so want to incorporate that, because the one thing that I do in the evening is three things I want to release from the
Mm,
day. And that has been so helpful for me, with just life happening and being a single mom and trying to, build businesses from scratch. So,
yeah.
um,
Same.
all of those things, and then also, like I said, I did like a major audit of my life. And so
Mm,
just continuing to release things has really helped me so much. But and we forget that we store that pain and trauma and grief
mhm,
and all that in our body. And so making sure that you're stretching. Or I came across a sort of meditative, but more of like stretching and movement to
mhm,
move trauma like out of your body, and grief and any sadness that
mhm.
you're storing. And women tend to store it in their hips, which I did not know
Yes.
that.
That's your emotional center. That's
Yes.
why when people stretch their hips and they do the hip stretches, they start to cry. So yeah.
I had no idea prior to this. So I just learned this about a year ago. And it's so interesting because I've been doing yoga for years, and since I was 16. And so
Mm,
I had no idea that that trauma is stored there for women. So
yeah.
just thank you so much. All the things that you're doing is amazing. And I love Deepak Chopra.
Yeah.
So just his 15 minutes on abundance is I love that. But I want to ask you a
Mhm.
question, and then I'll let Allie ask you a question about abundance.
Mhm.
What are some aspirations for you? Like as you are thinking about this community, and I know that you were doing some things like internally with different organizations. Like what are some aspirations for you?
Thank you for asking that, right? Um, because I believe if you don't put it out there, right, closed mouths don't get fed. That's,
That's
that's
right.
what I tell
I love
people.
it.
So I'm always telling people like whatever you want, you got to speak it into the universe. So that's even abundance mindset, but also knowing, I think what I've learned in that 21-day challenge, how I loved how Deepak like defined it, is that really understanding abundance is knowing that you have everything that you need right now in this moment, because we tend to like want all these other things and we think all these things are going to make us happy. But the real abundance mindset is knowing like you have everything you need right now, like that it's there within you. Okay, so that's my I've been thinking about doing a grief like grieving in abundance. I'll have to figure out a title like course to do that. But my thing that I really want right now that's speaking to me is I definitely want to continue doing events and do some really great elevated events around grief space, bringing people in community and having really important dialogues about it. And then also, like I mentioned before, the grief coaching, whether it's one-on-one or group coaching sessions to do the grieving in community for folks. And it's probably going to be people that are maybe just finished like the first year after their loss, because that first year is just a haze, you know? So really understanding the audience, right? And then also I'll be doing like I am an educator at heart. I can't get away from teaching. So I want to share the knowledge. And again, people like need different resources and to make that accessible to people. And I'm also putting together and going to launch the Say Hello to Grief Challenge. So kind of along the same lines as like Deepak's 21-day meditation challenge, where these are going to be days that we can do together as a community, that we can try different things, that these are going to be, these 21 days where we get together. We're going to have your challenge for that day. This is what you're going to try to like address your grief, acknowledge your grief, and to give people different ways that they can do that and say hello to their grief. And then talk about it with each other. And I think that that'll be really great to do. And then continue my services with corporate organizations or any other organizations that I already am offering grief education to. So this helps leaders become more grief informed, because there's a really big stat out there. At least 20% of your organization is actively grieving at any given time. So being able to understand that like your employees are grieving, and this might be another reason why like they aren't showing up how you want them to. So as leaders, how can we be more grief informed? So I offer that already to organizations. My biggest dream,
I just
go ahead.
I'm so sorry. I'm like
Uh-huh.
just getting chills right now because that stat is so true. And it might even be more
Oh
because
yeah.
I work in HR,
Oh,
and
okay.
um and so I see it so closely, and
Mm,
people are mourning and grieving things, and they don't even have the language
yes.
to talk about like what they're feeling, what how they're grieving. Like they don't even understand what stages they're in, and how
Hmm.
that's impacting their work. And so a
Yeah.
lot of times, like they'll try and bury themselves in their work, and
Hmm.
it's sometimes does themselves such a disservice. And so the fact that you are doing that, I mean, I wish that for every company and every person who's managing, who comes from a servant, kind of service oriented management style, who really cares about the employee and wants to do a great great job, in leading them. Like just giving them that language is so amazing. So I love that you're doing
Thank
that. And
you.
the courses, I'm signing up for your course.
Okay.
So just let me know
Okay.
when you do it, because I will be signing up for
Oh,
that.
I love
So,
that. Thank
yeah,
you.
it's
Thank
amazing.
you. Yeah, like, and that speaks to me, right? Because like even when you're talking about, because that's also like the grief in the workplace, especially since I do so much leadership, work, is I'm like, leaders, please add empathy to your toolkit because that alone can help solve a lot of your issues that you're dealing with. And sometimes people just get thrown into these leadership positions without they have all the technical skills, but those soft skills are so golden. Like if you can connect with people, and just understand that grief can be a scary word for folks, but if we can educate them, like what you're saying, it takes that fear away, so they can recognize it, they can help them better, and like we can just be more successful, right? So there's that. But I also think like another big vision that I have specifically is working with executives, as we're talking about leaders, is because if they're leading the whole organization, they're grieving, like they need that additional help. So I would love to be able to service them because I can speak that language. And then also with athletes, there's always going to be a way that I want to bring my worlds together. So, I mean, if I could put that big vision out into the universe, is if I'm working with professional athletes or with professional teams and helping them, or even collegiate, right? I think we had talked before, and you mentioned even just the college shooting that happened at UVA, and also right now, death by suicide, right? That the U.S. women's national team has been bringing attention to this because a couple of the team members on the soccer team played with a young woman named Katie in at Stanford, and she died by suicide. So they're bringing attention to mental awareness during this World Cup, which is beautiful, and then also honoring her life and saying that they're playing for Katie. And nutritionists, they have physical therapists, they have team psychologists, all those things, but to really have somebody very specifically grief informed speak with them and give them again that safe space, I think can also help them elevate their game and to continue to do the thing that they love.
Gosh, wow. Like I'm literally tearing up right now because um athletes especially, like I love that you want to do, work in that space with athletes, because we're always taught to be mentally tough and
Mm-hmm.
to like, not feel our feelings, and to just show up and show out, and
Mm-hmm.
almost perform. And so we develop this like exterior and toughness that sometimes we're not always tapped into our inner emotions and what we're really
Yeah.
feeling. And so we don't always have the language. And if you haven't been given that safe space, even for me as a child, like feelings were not important in our house, like my parents were, really tough on us, and so I was very empathetic, like almost like an empath growing up, but not really. I kind of held it in and would journal a lot about it. And I'm a former athlete myself, and so I know what athletes struggle with. Like, we've had athletes take their own life. An athlete from UCLA took his own life, a basketball player, and so many experiences that athletes feel and go through. But just again, like you say, there's a trainer, there's a physical therapist, there's the nutritionist, there's all these things for every part of who they are to help them be extraordinary. But this is so important as well. So
For
I
sure. Yeah.
cannot wait to watch you
No.
build this.
Yeah, so I'm in that phase of taking again that big leap of pushing myself and seeing how I can grow. But then I think also, like we were just talking about, that athlete mindset can be very proactive, for us, but understanding that like I also need to honor this other side of me. So sometimes I'm like, I need to calm that athlete mindset down. Like that does not serve me right now. And that I need to tap into that other softer side, right? And that's going to benefit you more.
That is so good. I just want to touch on one more thing, that is so good, especially like I think when people are transitioning out of athletics, that is when it's really hard, because like they're grieving the loss of their career, their identity, who they were, and then trying to, and Ali and I talked about this on a show with one of our guests and also just with each other, but that's something that we both experienced. My career was cut short because I had just tons of injury. And I did not know what my transition looked like. I didn't know who I was. Like, I didn't know what I was doing, and really had to give myself permission to just try things and to lean into that fear. And so that's been kind of the mantra for my journey, is just, I'm going to try it, and that's, and I'm like, if I fail, at least I learned. And so, so I love that.
Yeah, I mean that's huge, right? Thank you for bringing that up, because that's even something looking back is I think that's what coaches couldn't identify and other people around you couldn't identify, that when you're done, especially if it's after an injury, right? An unexpected done, not only like say like, in college if you're done, right? Or even in high school, that again it comes back to our identity. You are an athlete. I even led with it today, right? It's been so ingrained within me that like when you aren't that athlete anymore, right? It's like, who are we? And you lose all the value, all the attention of who you are just because of that sport. And that can be really damaging to people. And especially with that transition. So being able to identify that now and to be able to even take athletes through that and understanding it through a lens of grief, that hey, you are going to be grieving your career, you're going to be grieving your identity, you're grieving the team of being a part of a team and how different it looks and having the support that you had. So there, I can go on for days about this, but again, that's why I would love to be able to blend my passion and love for sports and being able to understand that world with this grief space as well.
I'm so glad that you're giving viewers the opportunity to understand the other aspects of grief, that it is a transition. It is a loss of expectation, right? It can be a change in environment. It could be a change in friendship, or just any transition, and any change in what we expected to happen is also a loss. Um, so thank you for touching on that it's not only death.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Can you, just shifting gears, can you share some books or resources, podcasts or sites that you um, feel were helpful to you through your healing journey that you would recommend to someone who's grieving?
Yeah, so I really love, as I was talking about the biology of it, this goes back to just being like a lifelong learner and being curious, is understanding the biological effects that happen on you and just how our brain works. But the grieving brain, I believe it's by Dr. Mary O'Connor. And the grieving brain is fantastic because again, you're like, okay, so this isn't just me. Like this is literally like my brain taking over, and this is what's happening. So podcasts early on, I really did appreciate Shelby Forsythia. She has a podcast that she's put out. I'm also thinking of I was like, let me look at my book over here too. I have Emotional Agility by Susan David. So emotional agility, really understanding like how our emotions play a part. It might not be a grief specific book, that's in there as well. The grief, What's Your Grief is a really good informational website that I really think is helpful. And then also I follow them on Instagram. They're really good, and they actually just published a book. So that one has different activities in it as well. So they're a really great resource. I think they're both therapists too. So that's also a good book. The Body Keeps Score, as
I was
we're
going to ask
talking
you about
about
that.
that one. That one's a good one. In there, I was like, where else? Oh, Anderson Cooper has a really great podcast. It talks about him and the death of his mother. And it's really interesting because he's actually uncovering and you're actually witnessing him grieving as he's doing this podcast. So that's a very interesting take because I think it's his natural curiosity, even as a journalist, right? Is he's talking with these people and he has these recordings of his mom that he intentionally like made because he knew that she was going to die. And so it's like really interesting to see him process it in the moment and learn from other people as well. So I mean, those are a few. So hopefully that can help some folks out there.
That's great. Thank you. And then also as a therapist, we do trauma focused cognitive behavioral therapy, EMDR. EMDR is eye movement desensitization reprocessing. It allows both the left and right sides of the brain, because sometimes our logical side will say, don't feel this, don't go there, you're fine. And it allows the emotional logical sides to work together to allow us to move through and experience that grief instead of blocking it.
I've been interested in that one. I'm gonna have to find someone that I can
I'm I'm
do.
I'm I'm certified in EMDR, and I
Oh,
have
okay.
but since we know each other
I
personally,
know.
I can teach you about it. And then
Uh-huh.
I also have colleagues who are certified,
Okay.
so we can talk
Okay.
about that
Yeah.
later. I wanted to ask you where people can find you.
That was the universe coming together. Hello, I'm grieving. Like that name was not taken anywhere. So every piece of platform that you might be on in social media, well, just about any, it's simply Hello, I'm grieving. So on Instagram at Hello, I'm grieving, on Threads now at Hello, I'm grieving, Facebook, my website is helloimgrieving.com. All of that is there. So yeah.
Amazing. I thank you so much for sharing the resources, and we'll be sure to include that so people can find some of those resources that you shared. And
Yeah.
I am obsessed with the book, The Body Keeps Score, because I learned so much in that book, and it helped me with my own trauma, things that I, was grieving and dealing with growing up. And so it's amazing to me. The body in general is just amazing to me.
For sure.
Being an athlete, but really understanding it after reading that book was just amazing. You have been such just an incredible guest today, and I'm just so moved by this conversation, and I look forward to like continuing to follow you and supporting you in any way that, Ali and I can be of support. Like, please let us know. But what you're
Thank
doing
you.
is just so important and extraordinary. And I'm so honored that you joined us today on Sunday.
Thank you. Well, thanks for welcoming me on. Oh, I did forget to add, if people do want the organizational training, they'll go to leaddifferentconsulting.com. So they'll go there if they want to book something for their entire organization. I've had whole companies like do it, or if they just want their team to do it or different managers to do that grief education for organizational leadership. So that's on leaddifferentconsulting.com. But I mean, I'm just grateful, for any opportunity that people find power in my story and being able to get it out there so we can continue to reach others. So really love what you all are doing too.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. And thank you so much, everyone, for listening. We hope you have a wonderful Sunday. Before we go, I have a question for viewers. After watching this episode, how does grief look different to you now? What might you still be grieving that you didn't realize until now was grief? And then share your grief story below, and we can all relate and heal together. Please follow us on Sunday Soul Day podcast on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful Sunday.
Bye.